I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to those of you listening on the internet and Pacific stations, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And you are having the fantastic luck to be listening to For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways they affect you. Your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and family and co-workers, and the bees and the trees and the bushes and the plankton and the snails and the ospreys, and pretty much everybody and everything else. Because like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together on this wonderful little planet called Earth. We have a great show lined up for you today. We'll just be chatting for another 10 minutes or so. And then we have an interview with 3 of the most important anti-nuclear activists of the United States. It'll be an interview with Diane D'Arrigo, Kevin Kamps, and Michael Keegan.
My heavens.
It was done at a anti-nuclear activist camp up in Michigan. After that, we'll be thanking our wonderful patrons, and then it'll be Rebecca's turn at the mic. What will you be talking about today, Rebecca?
In honor of Pride Month, I will be talking about Harvey Milk, environmentalist policies.
Excellent. In California, I believe?
Yeah.
We'll look forward to that.
All right.
This is a recorded show, so you won't be able to call in, but you can give us feedback. You can send us emails at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org, or you can text us anytime at 419-973-5841. You can also leave us comments on our Facebook page or on our social media on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, or Threads. We're recording this on an absolutely beautiful day in Northwest Ohio, the latest in a string of beautiful days, although this one is a little warmer than the average. That brings us to the topic of today's little talk, Get Out In It. Environmental news has been bad, generally, for a long time now. It's very easy to get depressed. Very easy. But one of the best ways to deal with that depression is to actually just get outside in nature. You've probably heard this before, but it continues to be upheld. Dr. Joanna Bettman-Schaefer at the University of Utah just did a year-long meta-study about the benefits of going outside. She and her team of researchers reviewed the data from thousands of studies. They found that getting outside for as little as 10 minutes a day has definite, measurable effects on mental health.
I would choose someplace with a lot of tall trees, so it would be cooler, personally.
Yes, very shaded.
Today, anyway.
It's difficult in Ohio for sure, since there's flat land everywhere here. We don't even have many forests.
Yeah.
But getting outside does reduce anxiety even in the heat. lessens the severity of depression.
No, that's not true. There's the southeast Ohio is Appalachian Ohio with a big national forests and stuff.
You know,
State
honestly,
forest,
I
whatever.
always forget about
Yeah.
Southeast Ohio.
Yeah.
It also
it's
has,
not our reality
right.
up here, you know.
It also has mountains, which I've been very curious to
Yeah.
visit. But someday I'll get down there and do some long hikes with my dog.
There we go.
Hiking in general does reduce anxiety, lessen the severity of depression, improve cognitive function, improve the ability to cope with stress, and of course have many other unnamed benefits. These benefits were applicable across the board. That is, it didn't matter if people were old or young, rich or poor, no matter the race, no matter the geographic area, Northwest or Southwest. Getting outside for as little as 10 minutes a day improved mental health for everyone. She actually recommends that mental health professionals start writing formal prescriptions for outdoor activities for the patients they're treating. Our roaming, unnamed reporter had a couple experiences this past week that he wanted to share with you. One was a moonlit kayak experience on the Maumee River. Back on the night of the full moon, a group of people who had been friends with Lynn Eckerson were out on the Maumee River as the sun went down and the full moon came up. It was an incredibly beautiful experience. The river was calm that night like glass, and the reflections of first the sunset and then the moonlight on the river were magical. A chorus of frogs serenaded the kayakers down the river. Lynn unfortunately passed away last year from cancer, but she was someone who really loved the sport of kayaking. In addition to kayaking in Northwest Ohio on places like the Maumee River and out among the Lake Erie Islands, she traveled all over the world. She had kayaked over the coast of Greenland and many other wonderful places. She was the one who started the full moon kayak events with her friends, and they paid her a beautiful tribute by repeating one of her kayak trips. We're not recommending that you go out kayaking in the dark. These were experienced kayakers who were going out as a group in excellent weather conditions with the proper safety gears. But kayaking at night on a river is still a little risky. But you don't have to take a lot of risks just to get out in nature. Northwest Ohio has some really amazing parks and trails that are really undervalued. Oak openings, the McGee Marsh, and other more popular areas are very well known and busy. But some of those smaller local trails, like Slippery Elm in Bowling Green or Secor Metro Park in Toledo, can give you a very pleasant natural experience that you can oftentimes enjoy in solitude. One of the keys to the quality of your experience in a natural setting is just how natural that setting is. It seems to us that the more domesticated the park is, the more it looks like a lawn rather than a natural area, the less relaxing and less beneficial to the mental health it is. There's a controversy right now in Maumee, Ohio, about the Towpath Trail. We've talked about this trail before. They've taken the eastern end of it and lawnified it. That is, they've cut out all the shrubs and wild plants and most of the trees, leaving grass and widely spaced trees that don't even provide continuous shade over the trail anymore. The view of the river is cleaner now for the dozen houses that matters for, but there's less to see. Getting rid of all that vegetation meant getting rid of the habitat and the food for birds and other wildlife. That end of the trail is much more sterile now.
Yeah, one time I was actually down there, we saw deer. Just kind of like standing, 10 feet away, basically. You know how they probably might be intimidated because there's not enough stuff to duck behind.
Yeah, hide behind.
Yeah.
I think deer like lawns because they have more to see,
Yeah, that's true.
They can have longer sight lines.
They can see things coming.
But I think they're much happier in forests.
Yeah.
If you walk far enough west along the Towpath Trail, you will come to the Sidecut Metro Park, where there is still some natural plants and flowers, and also still lots of deer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the park has proposed cutting out all that natural vegetation in order to put in a disc golf course. But luckily, the local residents are starting to speak out in defense of nature in their parks. Maumee in general has that air, doesn't it, where it pretends to be sophisticated.
What, if they were really sophisticated, they want more shaggier parks? Is that your point here?
No, if they were less sophisticated, no.
Oh.
If they were more sophisticated, they understand they don't need to shave their parks.
Right.
How's that?
Yeah, okay.
There are those kinds of people out there who simply can't deal with the messiness of nature. They see a natural area which holds a riot of different plants, vines and flowers all mixed together, seemingly with no rhyme or reason, and they think it would be improved if it was all mowed down, made flat, and controlled. But the science of ecology tells us that seeming chaos is actually a beautiful symphony of plants and animals cooperating and competing in ways that maximize life and therefore maximize the benefits to all of us. If you study ecology, you can learn to appreciate the seeming chaos of all the different plants, insects, and animals. You would know that the iconic species we all love, like hummingbirds, deer, and so forth, are absolutely dependent on having that messiness, that chaos.
Just bring tick spray, people.
Yes.
That's all you gotta do.
We've been lucky in our backyard. There's been much less ticks than last year.
Yay.
But I hear it's a bad year generally for ticks.
Yeah.
When you go outside to a wild place and you see a magnificent creature like a bald eagle, and you watch it make a slow, graceful turn with wings outstretched, using its white tail feathers to gently guide its flight like a rudder, it truly fills your soul with a sense of peace. And seeing a bald eagle is doubly encouraging, not just because they're so innately fantastic, but also because their history showcases a fantastic success story. Bald eagles were practically extinct in the lower 48 states, both because of the effects of pesticides like DDT and because of unregulated hunting and habitat loss. People were upset at the thought of the loss of our national bird. Laws were passed, like the Endangered Species Act of 1973 and the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act of 1940. And in fact, since 1940, it has been federally illegal to take, possess, or transport any part of a bald eagle, including molted feathers.
But what if you're taking it to the wildlife rescue place or the zoo?
At any time for any purpose is the wording of the law.
Oh my.
So
how did they get to the zoo then?
Well, you can apply for a federal permit.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think you can just show up at the zoo with a bald eagle in your hands.
No, I wasn't going to do that. I wouldn't have any hands, for starters.
Nesting sites were protected because of the importance of this, national animal. And the bald eagle has made an amazing comeback. There are almost 1,000 mating pairs in the state of Ohio alone now. Of course, this comes during a time when overall bird populations are on the decline. We know from annual bird counts in places like McGee Marsh that North American bird populations have dropped by as much as 50%. But we also know, looking at the bald eagle and looking at the many examples that our guest of a few weeks ago, Scott Weidensaul, talked about when we interviewed him about his book, The Return of the Oyster Catcher, we knew that if we make the effort to preserve and protect birds and the other essential parts of our ecosystem, we can succeed. If more people make preserving natural diversity a priority, we can turn around this progression towards extinction. Our anonymous reporter recently had the pleasure of visiting a woman who had turned her 1-acre yard into an oasis of native North American plants and flowers. She had spent 40 years weeding out invasive species and carefully tending to a wide variety of native wild plants. This includes some which are rarely found natively in the area anymore, like bearberry and wild blue lupine. While on a tour of her yard, we spotted several rare birds and a hummingbird moth sipping from the flowers of a trumpet vine. Having dinner in her screened-in gazebo in her lush, verdant backyard felt like being out in the wilderness, even though the properties on either side were clearly sterile, mode crafts. And I'm sure that all of you listening have these houses in your neighborhood where you can clearly see the love and care that has gone into cultivating a horticultural experience beyond the norms of suburbia. 40 years ago, this woman's lawn looked like theirs, but now it looks like someplace you would find in one of our most beautiful parks. Of course, after 40 years, she's thinking about what's going to happen next. Who will take over caring for her beautiful piece of the earth? That's a question the entire environmental movement is facing right now. Back in the 1970s, the youth of that day had a strong sense of rebellion. Our whole society had come to the realization that we were being lied to by our government and the captains of industry when they made false claims like the solution to pollution is dilution. They also said that millions of fish being killed by pollution and washing up on the shores of Lake Erie were just the weakest fish that were unable to adapt. They called it survival of the fittest, even though all of the fish were dying. The public turned to scientists and ecologists who studied the natural world to get answers.
I wonder if that's when we lost a lot of the Great Lakes sturgeon.
Ooh.
We're trying to bring them back now.
Mythical sturgeon,
yeah.
Yes. My father has seen a few sturgeon many years ago in Lake Michigan.
Nice.
None in Lake Erie, I believe.
Okay.
They also turned to the indigenous people who have been living in North America for hundreds of thousands.
You mean they didn't do their own research?
Of years. Well,
trusted these people who had just been, studying it their whole life instead. That's crazy.
This was 50 years ago.
Yeah,
People were maybe more intelligent back
There you
then.
go, yeah. Maybe so.
The answers and advice they got from the educated scientists who have been studying it their entire lives and the indigenous people who have been living it for generations led to real changes in the way that we have treated the earth. Sewage treatment plants went up around the country. Limits were put on pollution levels across various industries. People's attitude changed. Tossing trash out the window of your car, which was once considered normal, became a crime. And as a result, we saw real improvements. Within one lifetime, we've made incredible strides towards saving the planet. You can ask your grandparents about how the roads in America looked like back before the 70s and receive stories about how there were piles of trash on the major highways.
I believe it.
Nuclear power has actually served as a barometer of the level of people's understanding of ecology and the importance of protecting nature. Once people learned about how nutrients and pollutants get mixed together and travel around the world, carried by the winds, and then incorporated into our bodies and the plants and animals around us, we realized the fundamental immorality of creating radioactive wastes. Anti-nuclear activists haven't been able to shut down nuclear power plants everywhere, although they have succeeded in places like Germany and Taiwan, but we have battled the nuclear industry to a standstill all over the world. Of course, the nuclear disasters like 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima helped throw a glaring light on the many lies of the nuclear industry. But it's been 15 years since Fukushima, and in those 15 years, government and the nuclear industry have spent many billions of dollars reasserting all those lies. On the Diablo Cannon's nuclear power plant Facebook page this past week, there was a post about a student group at Berkeley called Nuclear is Clean that took a tour of the plant. The post had gushing videos of young college students singing the praises of the dirtiest, deadliest form of energy ever created.
But it looked spotless.
Yes, but
They'd swept up very well.
no other energy source can pollute for millions of years, and no other energy source can kill at a distance even when inactive or even with the waste produced by the process. It's unfortunate.
Yes, it is.
This is the situation that the generation that taught themselves about the evils of nuclear power is facing. There's the self-research.
Ah, yes.
That was the reason a few weeks ago for an anti-nuclear summit at the Circle Pines camp in Michigan. we were privileged to be able to interview 3 of the most accomplished anti-nuclear activists in the country at that camp. Surrounded by the unfettered nature in the 300-acre camp, it was easier to feel optimistic about the future, and I think that optimism carried through into our interview. Let's go to that interview now.
Hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and who you're with?
Hi, my name is Kevin Kamps, and I serve as the Executive Director of Don't Waste Michigan, and I'm based in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Hello, I'm Michael Keegan. I'm with the Coalition for a Nuclear-Free Great Lakes, and I'm based in Monroe, Michigan.
I'm Diane D'Arrigo. I'm the Radioactive Waste Project Director at Nuclear Information and Resource Service, based in the DC area.
All right, well, thank you all 3 of you for agreeing to be on the show this week. And we are here at wonderful Circle Pines in Michigan. And you folks have put together quite an event here. Could you please just sort of describe what we're all doing here today?
We have been meeting for a few days. We have one more day to go. This is the Small Modular Nuclear Reactors Summit, with a focus on the Palisades Nuclear Power Plant to the west of us here. We're in the 50-mile emergency planning zone. They want to restart a zombie reactor, and they want to build 2 brand new small modular nuclear reactors. So we're here to strategize against not only Palisades, but similar proposals across the Great Lakes Basin.
Yeah. As you mentioned, the Great Lakes Basin, several threats of new reactors coming in. So we organized to bring people together to empower them, try to build some tools to confront this tulip mania, this irrational exuberance of a push for small modular reactors in data centers, just not needed. So we're looking to introduce prudency and challenge that paradigm.
This is quite kind of a historic event because you folks have pulled together a whole bunch of people from a lot of different places. Just kind of give the listeners a scope of what this event was like, how many people have come, where have they come from, and sort of describe the group that showed up here.
Well, we had a pretty good turnout. We had in the room and on Zoom between 75 people to 85 people for every session, about 8 hours of education with some of the top nuclear critics in North America. And so we're hopeful that we're pulling this together and going to raise the issues, and that's what we got.
So we had people mostly online from Canada and people in the US from around the whole country, because these so-called small modular reactors, mythical magical reactors, are targeted in quite a few different places.
The strategies to fight them, what we're doing is collaborating to find out what the real flaws are, if there's any reality to their ability to be built, and to confront the funding that is coming from our federal tax dollars, our state tax dollars, to at least give the illusion that these improbable machines could be constructed.
So now, right now there's a tremendous amount of pro-nuclear propaganda going around on the internet, on all sorts of venues. Do you think that there's really as much support for nuclear now as the government and as the corporations that want to build these reactors claim?
Well, I've been doing anti-nuclear activism for 34 years now, and that makes me a newcomer in some respects in this movement. Michael and Diane have been doing a lot longer than I have, but in those 34 years, I've never seen a push this intense. And something was said that I found really interesting by one of the speakers, Dr. Vincent Intondi, who's now the executive director of Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. He said that this is perhaps this pro-nuclear push on social media by influencers who've been hired by the nuclear industry to do this, they're being paid, is probably the largest push on social media in history. That was something he said, and he's a historian. He's an author. His 2 books are quite fascinating. One of them is African Americans Against the Bomb. It's a history of nuclear colonialism and the resistance from the likes of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King, It's a very long list. And his second book was about the rally in Central Park, June 12, 1982. A 1 million person rally against nuclear weapons and nuclear war, and it's entitled A Day to Save the World from Nuclear Weapons. And so when he says something like that, he probably knows what he's talking about. So that's the kind of propaganda campaign that the industry is funding, and we're doing everything we can to counter it. And this gathering here is part of that. And his point was that the social media push, the propaganda push by the nuclear industry that's happening right now, that is very well funded, hiring influencers, is perhaps the biggest in history of any social media campaign. So this is the immense propaganda that we are facing, that we are all resisting, including Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, where Vincent and Tony is the executive, and all of our groups fighting the small modular nuclear reactor deployment happening throughout the Great Lakes Basin.
The number of people, both speakers in person and Zoom, is really impressive. Could you just list sort of the organizations that helped put this whole weekend together and kind of give a quick rundown of some of the people that spoke?
Yeah, the organizations sponsored this weekend were Citizens Resistance at Fermi 2, Don't Waste Michigan, Coalition for a Nuclear-Free Great Lakes, Ohio Nuclear Free Network, Nuclear Energy Information Services, 3 Mile Island Alert, and Nuclear Information Resource Services. So there were 7 sponsors for this weekend and came together wonderfully. One of the speakers, one of the experts, Arnie Gunnarsson, nuclear engineer, refers to what's going on as the industry is playing with opium. OPM, other people's money. They don't have a skin in the game. It's all taxpayer and ratepayer money. This is their scheme. It's a multi-generational Ponzi scheme to extort resources from an unwilling, unknowing public, disbanded out generations, lock them into indebtedness to pay for these boondoggles. There's no economic reason to pursue nuclear power. It's coming in at 3, 4, 5 times the cost of wind and solar. So it's a, there was tulip mania in 1637, speculation in tulips. Well, the tulip crop failed and the economy crashed. More recent times, Alan Greenspan speaks about irrational exuberance. Everybody's got to get on the bandwagon. We got to build one. If we don't, we won't, the competitor will build it. We got to have data centers. They're all self-serving. It's all fabricated. And it's going to fail miserably. And none of them have their skin in the game. It's other people's money. Opium. It's very addictive.
So, Diane, you've done quite a bit of the emceeing during this event. What has kind of struck you? What speaker or what subject kind of caught your attention? Because there's been quite a bit. This has been several hours of presentation.
So we started out with messages and information from indigenous people and the important messages about connectedness with the earth and the sustainability of the energy systems that we need to be pursuing. We had people talking about data centers and their challenges to those, and the technical challenges of those, how much water they're going to use, how much electricity they're going to use, and for what end. So people around the country are mobilizing to stop this theft of our data and our resources for a greedy, unnecessary data industry. There were also people talking about small modular nuclear reactors and the potential danger of reopening closed reactors, nuclear power reactors that were closed, supposedly economically, but the economics is because there were safety problems, dangers that those reactors posed that would cost too much to fix. Therefore, they were closed. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to try to reopen these reactors, not fix the old problems, and we've even had one of our nuclear engineers say that if Palisades were to reopen, it could suffer severe problems in less than 2 years, in 14 months, and not really operate. So billions are being poured in to open the closed reactors in Iowa, in Pennsylvania, 3 Mile Island, and here in Michigan, Palisades.
I think it's kind of a difficult time to be an anti-nuclear activist just because there's such an overwhelming media push for nuclear power right now. But I kind of got the impression that one of the goals of this conference was to sort of generate and spur on optimism and amongst the people, people here, some of whom have been fighting nuclear power for decades, some of whom are brand new to this fight. But was that really one of the goals of this, and did you think you succeeded?
The fight is on, and the stakes are high, and so we really do need to show up for this battle. And we realize too that we are aging, many of us, and that we need to educate a new generation of anti-nuclear activists and resistance. So a real motivation and goal of this gathering was to educate younger folks, pass the torch, inspire people hopefully to join the movement, build the movement. And so yeah, it is a tough time. We're doing all we can to counter this stuff, and like Michael Keegan said, it really is a house of cards, and it is going to come crashing down. The risks are that when it does come crashing down, like Diane said at Palisades, will it be a meltdown? And that's what we're trying to prevent, is the restart from even happening. We're trying to stop the construction of the new reactors there, because we care a lot about the Great Lakes, as we should. It's 21% of the world's surface fresh water, and 8 U.S. states, 2 Canadian provinces, and a large number of indigenous nations depend on it for drinking water purposes alone. So we have to fight with everything we have to protect this planetary resource that happens to be sacred too. So that's our goal, that's our challenge, and this is a launching pad for that kind of work.
How about you, Mike? Do you think you sort of sparked or renewed optimism amongst the attendees?
Certainly did. I think we're kicking nuclear butt. The inherent flaws in what they've put forward are they're going to fall on their own sword. We're going to help them to do that. There is no economy for nuclear. A guy named Eisenhower warned us as he left office, beware the military-industrial complex. And it is a military-industrial nuclear complex, which nuclear power is very much a part of it. The peaceful atom is a bomb. You would not have a military atom if you did not have the quote-unquote peaceful atom to run cover for it. So the inherent flaws, the conflicts are going to come out to play. This is an abolitionist movement. It takes a long time, it takes generations. But they are failing miserably. And it's going to become increasingly apparent as they attempt to deregulate the industry. Remove the regulator, remove any quality assurance, don't let the public have any say or any view of the documentation, all held in secrecy. It is a recipe for disaster, and they will collapse. They will fold on themselves, and we're just going to help to kick out those stilts from the house of cards.
So we did talk about the lack of affordability of nuclear and of data centers. We talked about the corruption that's necessary to enable them to be opened up or reopened. We also discussed the real dangers and why a lot of us are in these fights of radiation. Radiation causes cancer, it causes birth defects, it causes heart disease, it reduces our immunity and makes us more susceptible to other diseases that we otherwise could have fended off. And what we are faced with right now, in addition to inadequate current regulations, is a weakening of the already inadequate regulations. We are very concerned that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is about to weaken its regulations, take away the underpinning, deny that all radiation causes cancer, continue to not even pay attention to the other health defects that it causes, and raise the allowable exposures to the public, to workers, and pretend that there's a safe level below which they can release it, which could allow for nuclear waste to get recycled into consumer goods to make everyday household items. These are fights that we've fought many times over the decades, and we're going to have to fight it again. The proposal will be coming out in the next couple of months. We'll have 30 days to fight it, and people here have committed to fight to improve the radiation standards, not just try to retain the old weak ones.
All right, well, that's just about all the time we have, but I just want to ask each of you, something I learned that surprised me was that some of these small modular reactors don't even have emergency core cooling systems, which means no final way of stopping the reaction and, making the whole thing much more dangerous. What surprised you that you've learned on this during this thing, and just any last statements you might have?
Well, something that surprised me was the knowledge of folks who haven't even been a part of the movement and just are very quick studies. And so what made this whole conference a success were young people, newcomers, people who came in from a long distance, who helped the likes of me, technophobe me, to overcome technical difficulties with our Zoom connection, and also helped facilitate our sessions. So this was not a passive observers conference. This was full engagement, to the point where the folks who came helped to lead it, even though I've never even met them before. And that's very exciting stuff, actually.
Certainly, and we brought together data center folks, indigenous folks, young folks. These are three branches that normally don't show up at these types of conferences. And we're looking to pass the torch. I've been at it 46 years, but we need some new understudies. And I was excited that some of them showed up, and very bright minds, and I think we got a future in shutting these things down.
I'm excited about the plans we have about creating a curriculum on the dangers of nuclear power and nuclear waste and radiation, and the nuclear colonialism that the entire nuclear industry is reliant upon, whether they know it or not, and the kind of oppression that it's caused at every step of the fuel chain. And what we're talking about now is ways to highlight, emphasize, and educate about the full impacts of nuclear.
Now it's time for us to thank our wonderful patrons. Our patrons are fantastic people who went to patreon.com, that's patreon.com. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They scrolled through the different membership levels and picked a membership level that matched their budget. And now every month a little bit comes out of their account and comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. One of the things we enjoy, or at least I look forward to, being able to bring you with this show, are the eco-observations of Rebecca Wood. Rebecca, what do you have to say about Harvey Milk?
Okie dokie. Well, Harvey Milk was born in 1930 in Woodmere, New York, and died in 1978 in San Francisco. He was the first openly gay man elected to public office in California. To the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and in that capacity, he advocated for a number of environmentalist policies, including he advocated for public transit and walkability, and improved transit infrastructure to reduce traffic congestion, cut urban pollution, and also ensure mobility for working class communities in the area. He spearheaded campaigns of pet waste cleanup, which
That was also a problem. Yeah.
I've done posts about this in the past. Like, young people do not understand exactly how much dog doo-doo was everywhere in the 1970s. It was just underfoot, I thought about that the other day because I saw like a fossilized dog turd on the sidewalk, and I was like, wow, I haven't seen one of those since 1980.
Yeah. Even within my lifetime, I remember seeing those in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like, it's
1980s,
much better.
The first place I heard about it was New York had passed an ordinance like that. And I was all like, well, nobody's going to want to have dogs anymore, but dogs always triumph.
Dogs are worth it.
Yeah, I think dogs and Star Wars are America's actual religion, It's the only thing we all like, basically. Anything else we'll argue about. But also he championed the preservation and development of urban parks so that, preserve those as green spaces. He just thought for people's mental health, but it turns out you need that little patchwork to reduce heat and carbon dioxide and things too. So
ahead of his time.
Yeah.
In many ways.
He was, yeah. So yeah, that was a pretty important thing for him actually.
Yes.
I wanted to mention also, he fought against the encroachment of large real estate developers, and according to the Fly SFO, whatever that is, .com's article of 5/25/23, the San Francisco International Airport's Harvey Milk Terminal 1 won a Climate Action Award in 2022 for its from the American Institute of Architects of California because it has energy-efficient baggage claim carrier system, self-energizing elevators which recycle their own heat, escalators and moving walkways that go slower when not in use to save energy, and radiating heating and cooling complemented by displacement ventilation, as well as window glaze, which changes with the sun's position. I guess so, presumably, like, it reflects more when the sun is stronger in that area. So,
yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Then his legacy does live on.
Yeah, it does.
He would probably be happy to hear about that.
I think he would.
He was around today. Thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
And now it's time for Ecological News. Our first story comes to us from the website Ars Technica. The title is Environmentalists Turn Out in Force to Oppose Trump Coal Ash Rollbacks. This was published on May 30th. In a nutshell, the Trump administration is proposing to stop protecting Americans from toxic coal ash pollution. Coal ash is what's left over after burning coal. It's truly nasty stuff. It's contaminated with many heavy metals like mercury, arsenic, and lead. The organization Earth Justice reports that 90% of coal ash waste yards are contaminating the groundwater around them in the United States. Most coal ash is sitting in giant piles next to coal-burning power plants. Specifically, what Trump's EPA is proposing and has stated at a public hearing is, first of all, to tell owners of coal ash disposal sites that they no longer have to monitor their surrounding groundwater or surrounding areas to see if pollution from the coal ash piles is spreading. This is typical Trumpism. If you don't measure the contamination, you can claim that it simply isn't there and isn't causing a problem. Of course, the reality is that many studies have shown terrible health effects from living near coal ash. There's increased cancer, depression, and it can lead to reduced IQ levels and other neurological problems, especially for children. None of this should come as any surprise. Coal ash is contaminated with lead, and lead causes all of these neurological symptoms alone. The EPA's proposal would also allow companies that have coal ash to simply bypass national standards. In other words, the EPA is proposing to break the laws that limit the amount of pollution coal ash piles can cause. The worst national coal ash disaster to date was the Kingston fossil plant coal ash spill in Tennessee. That happened in 2008. Over 900 workers were hired to clean up coal ash. They weren't given any kind of special protective gear, and now most of them are either dead or sick. At the public hearing, hundreds of environmental organizations spoke out against the rule change, but no surprise, there were some coal companies that cheered on the proposal. This theme of not looking at the problem, not monitoring or measuring environmental harm carries over into our next story. This story is so egregious that you may have actually heard about it on the mainstream news. We'll be citing the story that ran in the New York Times on June 1st. The title is Trump Administration to Dismantle Ocean Monitoring Systems. There are over 900 very sophisticated buoys anchored in both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans off the coasts of Oregon, Washington, Alaska, North Carolina, Greenland, and Iceland. These buoys monitor a wide variety of parameters. They measure temperature, the mixture of gases dissolved in the ocean water, flow rate and direction, chemical properties such as acidity and oxygen, and even some biological indicators. The system cost $368 million to install. It began monitoring in 2016 and was planned to continue monitoring until 2041. The information it gathers is absolutely essential for monitoring hurricanes. The temperature and other data that it gathers is fed directly into hurricane modeling programs that allow meteorologists to predict how strong hurricanes will be and how heavy the rainfall is they will create. The system also monitors the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, which is the current that flows from the Gulf of Mexico over to Northern Europe, keeping Northern Europe habitable. The system costs $48 million a year to operate. The Trump administration had initially proposed eliminating it entirely, but Congress specifically budgeted money for it, in contradiction to what Trump had said he wanted. So, rather than actually fight Congress on the issue, Trump's administration is going to spend 15 months and tens of millions of dollars simply pulling up all these priceless monitoring stations. There's no plan to store or replace them. Most likely they will be scrapped. Trump is destroying monitors that continue to prove every day that he is lying when he says there's no such thing as global warming. This is perfectly in keeping with his leadership style. Back in 2020, during his first term in the middle of the COVID pandemic, Trump famously said, "If we stopped testing, we'd have very few cases." He is literally forcing the scientific community to make plans for the future of global warming blindfolded and deafened. We need to have this information in order to survive as a species, and Trump has refused us this opportunity. So after those two terrible stories, we need to have something a little more upbeat. On May 31st, our friends at Beyond Nuclear International published a story titled "Species at Risk Score a Reprieve." The subtitle is "Canadian Court Sends Radioactive Waste Dump Back to the Drawing Board in a Win for Wildlife and the Kabowek First Nation and Others Who Protect Them." The Canadian Federal Court of Appeals has overturned the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories Species at Risk permit that had allowed for a nuclear waste dump. This waste was about half a mile from the Ottawa River, a watershed that provides drinking water to millions of Canadians. The permit had been issued by the Environment and Climate Change Agency of Canada, and it authorized Canadian nuclear laboratories to destroy and kill a whole range of endangered species, including bats, warblers, turtles, wolves, and even ash trees. The court agreed with the First Nations and environmental organizations that were appealing the permit in saying that the Canada Nuclear Laboratories did not actually consider alternatives to locating their radioactive waste dump in the middle of a sensitive wilderness area. The court said that the company and the government agency did not adequately explain to Canadians why so many endangered species had to be wiped out. They also did not make the case to the public in any of their publications. This is a great victory because as Canada tries to plunge headfirst back into the folly of nuclear power, they are counting on being able to simply dump the waste, mostly on First Nation land, in the remote areas of the northern part of Canada, even though the people living those areas get no benefit at all from nuclear power. The company is considering appealing to the Canadian Supreme Court, but unlike the United States Supreme Court, the Canadian Supreme Court hears very few cases a year and only on extremely important and difficult areas of the law. This decision is a very straightforward case of corporation and the government not following proper procedures. It's unlikely this Canadian Supreme Court would take it up, and that means that this should be a solid win for the environment. Our next story comes from the website of the Grand Canyon Trust. It was published on May 20th, and the title is Grand Canyon Uranium Mine Water Problem Hits 80 Million Gallons. The subtitle is Uranium and arsenic levels in the sump at Pinyon Plains Mine are more than 3,000 times higher than safe drinking water levels, company data shows. Back in 2016, the Pinyon Plains uranium mine pierced into the local aquifer. Millions of gallons of water are flowing down through the mine into a sump, which is then pumped out onto the surface into an uncovered pond. The water in that sump has been getting more and more contaminated with uranium, arsenic, and lead for the past 10 years. Back when the water first started draining through, it was actually within safe drinking water limits. However, again, that was in 2016. Now the arsenic levels are almost 3,500 times the safe level. Lead is 600 times the safe level, and uranium is 3,000 times the safe level. There are several ways this is causing problems. First of all, the Grand Canyon is an extremely arid region. 6.7 million gallons a year may not seem like much to those of us in the water-rich eastern parts of the country, near the Great Lakes. But in arid Arizona, that can make the difference between a stream or a spring flowing or running dry. 80 million gallons have been pumped out of the sump since 2016, draining the local aquifers and depleting groundwater. Another problem is the open pond itself, which attracts wildlife of all sorts. Birds, small mammals, and even wolves are attracted to the open water and get past or around the fencing in order to drink it. And then they get poisoned by the heavy metals. One fear is that contaminated water from the old uranium mine will seep down to the deeper Red Wall Muha aquifer. That's the aquifer that fills the Havasu River, which is the sole water supply for the Havasupai indigenous peoples community. This serves as a reminder that the nuclear industry is deadly at all points in the process, from mining ore to creating the fuel to running the reactors and, of course, dealing with the waste. Our final story comes to us from the website EUobserver.com. It was published on June 1st, and the title is War is Driving Ukraine Green Energy Build Out, but Lack of Money is Holding It Back. After last winter, when so much of Ukraine was without electrical power, Ukrainian households started installing solar panels and backup batteries at a breakneck pace. Wind turbines, solar panels, and batteries at a local, decentralized level are much more resistant to being destroyed by bombs or drones than large fossil fuel or nuclear power plants. A single drone in the right place can set oil, natural gas, or coal stockpiles to burning. The nuclear power plant will melt down if external power is cut and backup generators are destroyed, and that could be done with relatively few munitions. A wind farm, on the other hand, requires a separate bomb for each wind turbine, and wind turbines are not easy targets. They're very narrow and basically have to be hit head on. The Ukrainians are adapting their new construction to the realities of war. For example, the transformers that connect the wind and solar electricity being generated to the grid and are now being placed extremely far apart so that each would have to be targeted separately, and all of them would have to be destroyed to take a wind or solar farm offline. Wind farms are going up in Ukraine even as the war continues. Workers often have to spend much of their time hiding in bomb shelters and waiting for an attack to pass, but the wind farms do keep going up. Last year, we interviewed one of the people working on the Tyleguska wind farm in Ukraine. The EU Observer article also talks about a company called Eco-Optima, which is building wind farms in another part of the country. This pattern is being repeated all over the world, as wars interrupt the flow of fossil fuels more and more, countries have decided to go full in on wind, solar, and battery storage. That's one of the silver linings we can take from all the bad news we've been seeing over the past months. The acceleration we need to see away from fossils and towards renewables is actually happening. Pro-nuclear advocates can continue to obfuscate about the transition being impossible without nuclear power, but in fact, that's exactly what's happening. Many countries are now making the transition without nuclear power. And many countries that have nuclear power, like the United Arab Emirates, are now beginning to regret their decision because nuclear power plants are natural targets in wartime. In fact, the IAEA just announced their 6th ceasefire, negotiated around the Zaporizhzhia power plant. This means the first 5 ceasefires all failed. It also comes on the heels of an announcement by the IAEA that off-site power to the plant has been cut yet again. The cause this time was reported to be the destruction of a thermal electricity generating plant nearby that supplied the essential outside power that every nuclear plant must have. Cut off-site power, blow up the backup diesel generators, and any nuclear plant will melt down and explode, creating a 1,000 square mile dead zone, which will always be too radioactive for your enemy to use. And as a byproduct, it will also contaminate the entire hemisphere that you're fighting in. The only rational thing to do with a nuclear plant in a time of war is decommission it, defuel it, and make sure the spent fuel pools are protected by international troops. And that is, dare I say, an inconvenient truth for those countries that have not entered the truly renewable path towards a green future. Well, that's it for our show this week. Sorry there wasn't more good news, but like the anti-nuclear activists at the Circle Pines camp, we need to move forward with a sense of optimism. We can turn this around. We've done it before, and we can do it again. This is Joe DeMare, signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!